With his COVID-19 ordeal over, Joe Biden's back in the White House tonight.
Mr. President, how are you feeling?
How are you feeling?
How are you feeling?
You couldn't hear it over the jet engine's roar, but Biden responded by mouthing, well. Biden had been isolating at his home in Delaware. That bout with the virus meant today's scheduled one-on-one with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was put off until Thursday. Biden reportedly told campaign staffers Monday that they may be on the verge of ending the war in Gaza. And for more on Netanyahu's visit, we're joined by Aaron David Miller. He's a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, as well as a former U.S. State Department Middle East negotiator. And we reached him today in Washington. Thank you so much for making time for us.
A pleasure to be here.
Tell me, why is Benjamin Netanyahu in Washington now? I understand that this trip was supposed to happen a few days ago, but that President Biden's COVID diagnosis delayed it.
He's here for 3 or 4 reasons. It's all about his politics and ours. Number one, he's determined to shore up what is a sagging popularity at home by pulling off a long withheld White House meeting as well as an address before Congress. He will now best Winston Churchill, having addressed by tomorrow Congress 4 times, twice the number that Nelson Mandela had in speaking to Congress, and twice the number of the late Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. That's number one. Number two, he's determined to maintain a functional relationship with Joe Biden for the next 6 months. The Netanyahu government needs Biden. Military resupply. They're facing the prospects of an expanded war in the north with Hezbollah. And number three, he needs to sit down with Kamala Harris, and I suppose he'd want to get off to as good a start with the putative Democratic nominee as possible. And finally, he's on the forgiveness tour with Donald Trump, and he'll probably see Trump Thursday or Friday in Mar-a-Lago. Former president was angered by the fact that Mr. Netanyahu called Joe Biden, congratulating him when he became president, and didn't side with Donald Trump's claims of a stolen election. This is all about politics, not about substance, not about diplomacy. The reality is, though, that sometime by the middle of August, the odds are higher than ever that you actually could have an Israeli-Hamas agreement. Once the Israeli Knesset goes out of session, July 28, Mr. Netanyahu no longer has to worry about a no-confidence motion. And if he's going to move, and if Hamas is going to move, it's going to occur in mid-August.
Do you believe that we're really close to this now? We know that Antony Blinken was saying that last week, as sort of the eyes of American politics watchers were all on whether Joe Biden would make the decision that he eventually did end up making. Tell me about that. What are some of the factors that are leading you to believe that we are now close to ceasefire that has seemed so elusive for so long now?
Yeah, and remember, we're talking about a 3-phased agreement. In my judgment, if you're lucky, you'll get Israel and Hamas to sign on, but it's very unlikely that you'll get beyond phase 1, which is a 6-week ceasefire, limited exchange of hostages for an asymmetrical number of Palestinian prisoners, and an opportunity for the population of Gaza finally to surge humanitarian assistance into an environment in which there won't be active military conflict underway. The other 2 phases are much less much harder to attain. Look, I think Hamas is under great pressure. CIA Director Bill Burns, in a closed-door session in Sun Valley, Idaho, a week or so ago, said that Hamas commanders are pushing Yahya Sinwar, the key Palestinian decision maker. They need a breather. The Israeli Defense Forces is telling Netanyahu that they need to redirect their resources to the north to deal with the greater challenge of the possibility of an Hezbollah Israeli calculation. And I think the public opinion in Israel with respect to the hostages is also, I think, a very important factor. And again, Israeli intelligence and the IDF has concluded that there are 120 hostages, 44 have probably died of the 120. They were killed on October 7th. Their bodies brought back to Gaza by Hamas to trade, or they died in captivity. So I think there really is a moment here. The question is are Israel and Hamas willing to do something that they have been reluctant and or refused to do over the last 4 or 5 months? But I'll make a prediction that the chances of doing this deal through phase one are probably better than they've ever been. Look, Middle East negotiations have two speeds, slow and slower, and there are no guarantees here. But it seems to me we have the best chance that we've had.
Aaron, while I still have you with us, let's talk about Kamala Harris and her views. Obviously, as a vice president, she did not get a chance to express her views on this conflict quite as often as we have heard from President Biden or Secretary of State Blinken. What kind of territory could Benjamin Netanyahu be entering with Kamala Harris? We do know that she has questioned Israel's military approach, saying not enough is being done to ease the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza, but we don't know if that's an indication of her policy stance. What do you know about where she stands on this and whether that's going to continue if she does secure the candidacy and presidency?
Well, she's a moderate mainstream Democrat with moderate mainstream views on Israel. She's not a Democratic progressive on this issue. That is to say, a fair number of progressives, including a few mainstream Democrat senators, have called for conditioning U.S. military assistance to Israel. I don't think that's where Kamala Harris is. The talking points surrounding the visit and the meeting with Mr. Netanyahu, which will occur on Thursday, were bromidic routine talking points. Pledge to the security of the state of Israel, friend of Israel, the partnership, the whole 9 yards. I do think, though, that there's an inner Kamala Harris. She's of a different generation than Mr. Biden. She does not have the relationship with Israel and Israeli governments that goes back decades. She's much more empathetic, I think, with respect to the issue of Palestinian rights and Palestinian suffering. And you've heard that in the instances when she has chosen to make her views known in the course of the last 6 months. But she also needs to be extremely careful because the prime directive here, the strategic objective, the overriding objective, if you're Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, is to gain the White House. And she's going to have to be very measured and tempered in her remarks, public remarks, with respect to Israel, lest she alienate conservative Democrats and provide the Republicans with the ammunition that they're looking for. They're already trying to paint her as a left-wing radical, which is patently untrue. So the question we can't answer. All presidents are blind dates. We can go over their resumes, we can do all kinds of background research, but you don't know what a president is going to do until he, and one day she, ends up in the Oval Office, challenged with the politics, the policy, the responsibility of this job. So whether or not the inner Kamala Harris will make itself felt on the Israeli-Palestinian question, I suspect we're not going to know for some time.
Aaron, thank you so much for your expertise and analysis. As you've said, she has a very fine line to walk until that date in November. Thank you so much. Aaron David Miller is a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, as well as a former U.S. State Department Middle East negotiator.